The truth of it is all donor commitment is driven by interests. Let's not kid ourselves about that. There is no donor organization that will come to you that would come without the
having its own agenda.
Exactly. And as far as I know, the international donor community at the moment is driven by certain issues. So as an example, women empowerment, climate change, of course, gender violence, and things like that. Now, unfortunately, the situation in the Northwest has not been documented enough to allow for the disaggregation of the various challenges. So as an example, we know that women are being affected, but there is no documentary evidence in terms of the numerical numbers, evidence that would show how many women have been affected and all of that. So that, I think, is part of the challenge. But it would also be, I would say, wrong to say that the international community has not shown interest. I am aware that the INGO Forum, which is the umbrella body of all international non-governmental organizations in Nigeria, has an, I think, action plan, a development plan. I can't remember the exact title. 2020, I can't remember the years, the range, but about 4 years, and that it was able to identify development needs, especially humanitarian, for up to a period. And from what we are told during the conference, they've been able to raise a certain amount of money to allow for interventions in different areas in the Northwest. I also know that the EU, not too long ago, held a conference, a summit, a meeting, where they highlighted the Northwest development challenge. The conference itself is an indication that the international community is now beginning to focus on the Northwest. Like I mentioned, it was facilitated by the UN system with the support of the German and the Netherlands government. So I'm quite happy. I also mentioned that it looked like the mistakes they made in the Northeast, they are trying to avoid it here in the Northwest. And I agree with them. What happened in the Northwest is, over time, a dependence syndrome, for lack of a better word, developed, where a significant portion of the affected community started depending, as it were, on aid from these communities. And that's not the idea. The idea is to support and then, of course, either hand over to government or allow people to go back to their livelihoods. But where a trend of dependence is sustained, then the whole idea of humanitarian and development aid would be useless. And so I think that is what they're trying to avoid in the Northwest, where they will work with the governments, but allow the governments to be in the forefront for those type of development.
But would you also suggest a time frame? I mean, from the international community, okay, so look, between this time, and this time, this is the time we can provide you with the support. If, we don't see positive or significant progress and implementation, well, you're on your own. Is something like that likely to happen?
I mean, let's be very realistic. I started by saying that all donor organizations have their interests. The onus is on us as Nigerians to ensure that the interventions are guided in a manner that our national interest is protected.
Beautiful.
And in that, I want to call on the federal government with all sense of responsibility, especially if you look at the Renewed Hope agenda. And please, I would pray and hope that NTA sends this message to those that matter. The Renewed Hope agenda talks about developing frameworks for addressing security at the regional level. It is one of the priorities that is mentioned in the Renewed Hope agenda, that the coordinating elements within our national security architecture would develop frameworks for addressing security at the regional level. That has been presented to the administration by this conference. And I'm a bit concerned that the federal government's role in the conference is laid back. The Vice President was there. He made a speech on behalf of the President. The Office of the National Security Advisor was there. The Minister of Defense was there in person. Several other federal government officials were there. But because I participated in the process and because it's a public era, I would leave it to say that the federal government was a bit laid back. But the opportunity is there. It is a low-hanging fruit that the federal government, the administration, can use as an example to say we have developed the first regional framework that can now be emulated in the other framework. Now, what's the importance of this? Each of the regions have peculiar security challenges. You can't use one brush, a stroke of brush to address the security challenges across the region. Obviously. Now, because stakeholders have come together in the Northwest and have sat down and are now discussing. Remember, in their opening remarks, we discussed that a committee will be set up. The federal government should be represented in that committee.